Hello and welcome to another one of our videos where today we're going to be discussing isolation training. Really going to be looking at the who, the when, the why, and is it useful in general really. So the answer to the question is it really isolation training good to use, and you would have heard us talk about functional training thousands of times. Well, the answer is surprisingly yes, and also no at the same time. So just to confuse you a little bit more. So basically what is isolation training was more or less when you're isolating a joint, so like or an individual muscle or one or two muscles that cross one joint, so in this case a bicep curl or the quadriceps. So separate from how they're used as in function in a real movement that you would use in daily life or sports or whatever it may be. This also includes stretching, so strengthening is the contraction of it and the stretching is the isolated part of it. Now both of them, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, you just need to understand when to use it. Alright, so where did the strength training part of it really originated from the 50s? If you go back, and there's some great books by the researchers of PNF patterns, where they really invented a lot of the stuff that's used today to cure people from polio. So the vaccine was invented, but all these people were emaciated. They had just basically wasted muscle tissue. They could hardly function at all. So they were basically funded by the government to find a way to develop muscle and develop it fast, so these people could, get back to living their life. But so that's where they realised how the muscle functions worked with crossing joints, and they were able to add some strength, but the problem was they weren't able to make them move better. So after a few years of doing that, they scrapped their entire research, started all over again, and that's where the PNF patterns were found, and that's where they found that body moves efficiently in spiral patterns and contralateral movements, and and that's where things like antagonist stretching and stuff like that was all developed. However, Nautilus, everyone would have heard of the machines, the strength training machines, used the old information that the researchers had just thrown out, knowing that even though they could make someone stronger, they didn't make them move better. They'd used this information to develop machines and basically marketed it really well to the bodybuilding industry, and the rest they say is history. So, and that's really where a lot of the gyms and that are stuck today, and a lot of people, in gyms, even not even using machines, but just free weights versions of machines, really sort of not doing themselves any favour on how to move better. All right, so what's so wrong with it? Well, basically, it's separating the muscle from the team. So if you see the team here works together, they have to work together as a team to be able to move. If one of them decides to do his own thing, you don't, as in the case of this, the pictures here, the cogs don't move. All right, so these guys don't know how to work without each other. They don't work on a separate level. So when you train them on a separate level, you disrupt their timing and their sequence, and you're ignoring the role of the brain in coordinating their task of what to do and when to do it. When you think of how we move in chunks of patterns. So it's like basically it's a group of movements linked together in this big chunk. So the chunks basically save us time and mental energy on having to move, and this is what's called a motor program. So the motor programs link many of the movements together all at once to complete a task. So for example, to pick up a pen, I wouldn't want to have to think about contracting my bicep, my forearms, then reaching forward with my lats and bending over it. That would be exhausting just to pick up a pencil if I have to actually move like that. The best way to make the muscles stronger is to train them in their pattern, in their program. If I improve the program, I improve all of them, and I've got to improve all of them relative to each other. That's the key. When you start taking them away from their individual realm, you could make one stronger, but not relative to the others. So that's when you get disjointed movements, and consequently poor performance happens first, and then injury and pain happen later. So an example here of a bicep curl versus say a chin up, both of them are activating the biceps, but the key here, and rock climbing, is basically the same movement pattern as a chin up. But rarely do we actually do anything that's just individually standing still with a bicep curl. I might use my biceps to lift my shopping bags, but I'll be using my legs to bend over to pick it up, which really is a deadlift. And really the key is to using my legs, not my arm. Understand that the arm is the weaker part of the entire chain. Right, so there's no point making them stronger and leaving the rest of them weaker and not functioning together as the team. All right, so it's an example of where you're sort of screwing up the sequence, because if I make my bicep really, really strong, but my lats aren't as strong as my arm, and then I try to do things because I think I've got strong arms, I can actually cause huge problems at my shoulder because my shoulder can't stabilize itself, and this is what we see all the time. So, for example, in the motor program of a chin-up, I'm using forearm muscles for gripping. Biceps are being involved, obviously, the lats, the deltoids, the rear deltoids, the traps, lower traps, mid traps, the core, and I haven't even included all of the muscles that are working as synergists or in eccentric roles. So, for example, the triceps are also working, and all the muscles that are opposing, even the pecs are working in the chin-ups to some degree. And there's muscles that work opposite to all of these that are basically trying to control and break the movement so you don't pull bones and things out of it. So there's so many things on the job at once, and they all have to communicate as a team to provide a smooth movement. If I improve the movement, I improve them all. So it makes really no sense to work on one if I don't have anything wrong with me. All right, so it's where you must understand that motor programs are how we move. You can't ignore that. That's just fact. So again, if I use the analogy of the cog, if I spin with this cog quicker than all the others, I start to disrupt the timing because they're not meant to spin that quick. It's meant to spin at its specific speed in specific movements, and I can disrupt the whole chain of how things move. I have to compensate somewhere else because one's doing too much or not enough. If I want to make this one stronger, I make them all stronger. I must make them all. If I want to speed them up, I speed them all up. All right, not just one. And that's how I preserve my optimal movement patterns. So potential problems, as we mentioned, firstly shoulder imbalances, postural imbalances, shoulder injuries will result as a problem from that, elbow injuries, even lower back injuries, so you can probably pick things up because you think your arms are so strong, when in fact your legs and your trunk and your core are probably not strong enough to withstand the load, and then bang, you get a bulging disc or something like that. So the timing is all disrupted. It's just not really a great way to approach training. So if you want to get stronger, I'm going to say this over and over, improve the movement you want to be stronger with. So if you want to be stronger at push-ups, do more push-ups. Don't do tricep push-downs. So, this may help in some degree, but again, you might improve this tricep strength not relative to the chest and the deltoids or the core. You're disregarding the others. You're not developing the timing. You may completely disrupt your scapular function. Your core control may not be there. So usually with push-ups, that's exactly what I see. I see poor scapular control and core control. That's why they're not good at push-ups. Nothing to do with the tricep. All right. So to get good at push-ups, just do more push-ups. But does this mean that it's dead? Well, no. I still will use isolated exercises. They still have a purpose, and they're very useful in rehabilitation. Using isolated exercise after an injury to activate a known weak muscle is critical. Example in the tricep one, if I had my broken arm, I might have had a huge amount of atrophy from having my arm in plaster for a few weeks. So I might need to use some specific forearm exercises or even bicep curls and push downs before I can get into a push-up because it'd be just too weak. Understand though that these isolated things don't work in an integrated movement for it's weak and disabled. So VMO, glutes, serratus, lower trapezius, these guys are all muscles that people try to activate all the time because they're weak and disabled in the integrated movement. So VMO and glutes in a squat, for example, serratus anterior, lower traps in a push-up or any overhead activity. Right, so you might need to isolate them to encourage them to work again as they're supposed to. But you must integrate them back into the team, because if you fail to do this, you'll just set yourself up for more dysfunction and pain. So it's not just bodybuilding that abuses the isolation training, very much the rehab world. That's probably where I see a lot more of the problems coming from. So for example, for a knee problem, doing leg extensions won't change how you squat, especially creating this. So for patellofemoral, so weak VMO for example, you may very well strengthen it in a leg extension. It will do absolutely nothing to prevent your problems with patellofemoral tracking, ITB friction, ACL problems, because it's nothing to do with the VMO. It's everything to do with the ankle, the hip, and basically your brain, how you're coordinating the movement. This will change this not at all. If I have a back problem, and someone says you've got to strengthen your core, you probably do, but not doing this. You need to strengthen your core while you're doing this, because that motor program will not change this one at all. No, this is muscle isolation, but it doesn't change this program. The brain only knows this program and keep using it until you show it another way, same as these. So if I want to improve my core, I improve my core on the program I suck at, not isolating with muscle training. This is where there's so much confusion in the rehab world at the moment, and just really destroying people's bodies, keeping them in pain for longer. So most of the time, injuries are from poor stability, poor mobility, and poor motor control. Right, so it's a stability problem. It's not an isolated. There's be no point me just isolating all of these different muscles on the go. If I improve the pattern, I improve all of the movements at once. So for example, if we come back to the knee one, you can see if you've watched our videos before, this is how many things that are possibly, and this is not even all of them, these are just some of the things that are all happening within a split second. So if I just isolate a VMO, how am I going to change any of the things that are going to contribute to faulty form that's most likely going to blow my knee out? The knee really has no control over all the things that are happening. So if I have excessive pronation from weak feet, I'm going to rotate in. I have no choice. The knee can't control that movement. And the knee shifts in, the pelvis goes into anterior tilt, I develop weak glutes and tight hips, or it could be the other way around. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4. It could come from the hip end. All right, I have to train the movement pattern together. I might need to isolate it, but then I integrate it. All right, so this also includes stretching. So if I've got a tight hamstring, as you see here, if I just do this and leave it at that and don't teach myself how to stretch it in the movement where it's really not working well, I'll change nothing. The stiffness is there for a reason. It's to protect my joint, because I don't have the ability to stabilize in the first place. So I have to, this is where we find, so integrated stretching with drills that replicate movements are much better, and also following up straight away with the stability and the movement skills following the stretch gives the flexibility a greater chance of staying permanent. So the mobility drills, they're more moving parts because they're not limited to one joint. So for example, this one here is knee, hip and ankle on the opposite leg. So this represents a squat, this represents a lunge, and I actually move it in and out. I don't actually hold it still. This one's more of a thoracic rotation drill, where I'm really moving several joints of even my cervical spine and my upper back at the same time, and maintaining lower back stiffness so I don't bend or rotate through there. So I'm creating good stiffness where I need it, where this is just the one joint. All right. This one here, this is a movement, a deadlift, where I am stretching the hamstring, but I've got more moving parts involved. If I'm going to have a better chance of improving hamstring flexibility through there than I am through here. All right, so this still has a purpose. I might use that first, then that second. But if I just do that on its own, I'm not going to get very far. If I just do that on its own, I might just hurt myself. So I might need the two together. All right, so the key to using it is be wise about it, be smart. If you train smarter, you'll get good results. So this is where I'm saying, and I've sort of mentioned several times, I'll integrate. So I'll have, say, a clam exercise for my glutes integrated into a single leg deadlift. So they're both, I might use this to wake the glutes up, but then I teach this how to actually make it work with the rest of the team. So it functions as in its role within the sequence and fires at the right time, in the right order, and does everything that I need it to do. All right, so summary: isolated training has its place, but it must be used wisely. If you don't have an injury, you're best to avoid isolating. Just stick to the integrated movements, because it's really how you're going to enhance your movement and become stronger anyway. If, however, you have an injury, it may be needed, but always remember, integrate it back into the system. Use mobility drills, stability drills, and learn movement patterns. So you use your isolated exercise first, follow it straight up with an integrated one, and go round and round in circles until you get to a point where you don't need it anymore. All right, so if you have any questions about any of this, just go to our website. There's heaps of information. There's free reports you can get. There's heaps of online, so free reports like this one. There's online programs for knee pain, back pain, shoulder pain, a whole lot. There's links in the description under the video below. You can check that out, and and that'll give you a bit of an idea of what to do with isolated training techniques.